realistic is it that we could see a move by countries in this part of the world to move away from putting all of the emphasis on tankers as the only way to get their product to market and focusing more on pipelines, as the outgoing energy secretary has said?
Yes, thank you. Well, look, I think there's actually been an attention for quite a few years on using pipelines more. And, we've got to say that there's no perfect solution for exports. Tankers can be vulnerable at certain times, so can pipelines. The point is about having options, about having a diversity of routes, about having backup. And that's really what Saudi Arabia and the UAE have tried to do with their pipelines. So as you pointed out on your map, the Saudi pipeline runs across to the Red Sea, so avoiding the Strait of Hormuz. And the Abu Dhabi crude pipeline also to Fujairah also avoids Hormuz. And that's always been seen as the key choke point and the one that these pipelines are trying to bypass. So Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Oman have options for most of their crude exports if things were to go wrong. The other countries in the region, as you rightly say, if we take Kuwait or we take Qatar or Iraq, have no options or very limited options other than using the Gulf. And they've kind of stood out as being more vulnerable. And there have been ideas, particularly by the Iraqis, to build a pipeline to Jordan, for example, or to expand and rebuild their pipeline through Turkey, but those have not really advanced as yet.
There's so many things that this calls into question, right? This is not just about the trillions of dollars that the United States and other countries spend every year, to police the Persian Gulf. This is also about the fact that most of those energy supplies moving through the Persian Gulf and stored through the Strait of Hormuz are headed to Asian markets as well. And we're not talking about, increasing the pipelines necessarily towards Asia. We're talking about getting the product to market to the rest of the region. How much do you think that we're going to see a collaboration here growing, not just off the back of the Abraham Accords? Because I got the sense from the secretary that even the Egyptians are rather on board with this one and trying to make it work, even though it does raise questions about how much people would then be using the Suez Canal as a point of transit.
Right, and one issue that the recent agreements between the UAE and Israel raises is the use of the pipeline that runs from Eilat on the Red Sea coast of Israel to the Mediterranean at Ashkelon. So that is an alternative to using the Suez Canal. It's also an alternative to using the Sumed pipeline, which you showed on your map, which runs across Egypt. So again, it's giving another option. But of course, that is a way of bypassing Suez. That still doesn't necessarily get around the Strait of Hormuz issue. But it does perhaps help with the Saudi pipeline, which runs to the Red Sea, combined with a route across Egypt or across Israel. Now, Saudi Arabia, of course, hasn't signed on to these normalization accords with Israel yet, although it may do so at some point. So that gives another option. But I think that's really a lesser one. I think all the attention, or nearly all the attention, has been on the Strait of Hormuz because it's such a narrow point, because so much of world oil trade passes through that, and a large part of world liquefied natural gas trade as well. And because, of course, when you think about the tensions with Iran, that has always stood out as the point that could be threatened in the event of a conflict, and even if it's not outright conflict, but low-level attacks on tankers and so on, as we saw at times last year. That's always been the key vulnerability for oil security planners. And of course, oil, as you say, coming out of the Gulf is going to Asia, it's going to India, it's going to China, Japan, and so on. Those countries have also always been very aware of their vulnerability. And you'll notice that most of these bypass pipelines are kind of going west. They're almost going towards Europe rather than towards Asia. The options to go towards Asia are much more limited by geography.